Hello, and welcome to Business Today. Are you a business that's been looking for financing, been to a traditional lender, looking for some other options? Today we're going to be speaking with Joseph Reid of ACCESS BIDCO. ACCESS BIDCO is a different type of lender, and I think you're really going to enjoy what we have to say. Joe, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm great as well. Thanks for coming.
Absolutely.
All right, so the very first question I have is, what is ACCESS BIDCO? What does the name stand for?
ACCESS BIDCO, the word BIDCO stands for Business Industrial Development Company. And we are a regulated financial institution. We're regulated by the same banking department that regulates state chartered banks. And what our purpose is to fill that gap in lending that exists between traditional bank and venture capital funding.
Okay.
You know, there's really nothing in between. There's not a lot in between. There's us.
There's you.
There's us, yeah.
All right. So Business Industrial Development Company. My guess is that you did not decide to come up with that name. That is something that has been created into law, kind of like a credit union, right? It's a specific type of...
Correct. There's a BIDCO statute for the state of Michigan, and that's what we operate under, and it's called the BIDCO statute.
Okay. And so you told us a little bit about the different spaces, right? So we have our traditional lending, we have our venture capital, of course we have our entrepreneurs who are bootstrapping themselves using their own credit cards, friends and family, and then ACCESS BIDCO fills a gap in there.
Correct.
Right. So tell us a little bit about your mission, your history, how you got started.
Yeah. We've been around since 1991. We were one of the last BIDCOs to be formed in the state of Michigan. And we started out in 1991 by raising private equity. And then the state of Michigan, to encourage the formation of BIDCOs, also put in some equity to get the business started. And that got us going, and we've been in business ever since.
Okay, so how do you target that gap that you're looking for?
Yeah, you know, the thing about when somebody's going to get a loan, there's really limited sources beyond bank lending that you can call and get a traditional loan from. So if you look back to the I'm going to give a little history on BIDCOs, if I can. Yes. It was in the mid-'80s, Governor Blanchard worked with state legislature, to put this together and to encourage the formation of BIDCOs. And so I think it was 1986 was the first BIDCO that was started. It was called ACCESS BIDCO, and that was the state of Michigan that worked in combination with Chrysler Corporation. Mm-hmm. And also additional state funding from the state pension fund to get this thing going, to get it started. And since then, that time, there were at least another 17 BIDCOs formed. What we did, or what they did back then, was they were just trying to create another source when you can't get a loan at a bank and you got no other place to go. That's where the BIDCO stepped in. And since then, there's been a lot of other resources that have come up for people that have been created. But at that time, there was really nothing beyond banks.
Right.
And so that was the encouragement. ACCESS BIDCO is kind of interesting. We actually acquired then ACCESS BIDCO.
Okay. About
3 years after our formation. We acquired what was the largest BIDCO in the state at the time. So you can say we have both the first and the last BIDCO in the state.
Right. And so in a way, you are just continuing a tradition that was started.
Correct, yeah.
Yeah, all right.
Yeah.
And so, as you said, the original reason for the formation of BIDCOs and the BIDCO statute was to fill a funding gap.
Correct.
Now, you are regulated just like any bank would be regulated, but you are not an arm or a form of the Small Business Administration. You are a completely separate entity and type of entity.
We are, yeah. We have private investors that own the company. We have a board that runs it. And although we're regulated like a bank, we're really not regulated to the same degree as a bank. So we have a lot more freedom in the kind of loans we can do. We don't have the same constraints that are put on banks by regulation today, especially after the economy we just went through.
Right.
The banking regulation just keeps building and getting worse and worse. I mean, we're almost to a point where regulators are running banks at this point. They don't run us, and our statute allows us a lot more freedom than what you get with a bank.
I'm going to categorize you as Michigan's best kept secret as far as lending categories go, because you and I were talking before we went on air. I had not even known about this category of funding until I recently read an article about you. So can you tell us a little bit more just about how would someone reach out? How would a business find ACCESS BIDCO?
It's not easy to find us, and I think we talked about that too. You know, we've not done any marketing, but we have a small web page, accessbidco.com, with our phone number, and we can be reached by email. But everything's been word of mouth for us. We don't do. We probably do 15 deals a year, 10 to 20 deals a year, I would say. So we're not a large institution. We're small, and so we haven't had the need to advertise. But it's been enough for us so far.
So if you're doing 10 to 15 deals a year, there's probably a threshold, right? There's a size, there's a minimum that you're looking at, there's a max. So what's this range, the average range? Because every deal is different.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, the smallest deal we did was $8,500.
Okay.
And we don't encourage those deals. We're not looking for them. But part of our charter is to help, even when it's not financially beneficial. So there are some deals we do just because we think it's the right thing to do. Our largest deal is $2.3 million that we've done. So our sweet spot is in that $700,000 to $1.4 million range. Those are the size that we're looking for on a daily basis that we want to be able to do. But of course, we've done everything from 0 to 2 million. So. And
you've talked a very little bit about your charter and that your mission is to actually help businesses develop. And let's talk a little bit about the name, Business Industrial Development Company. So that would suggest to me that the category was created really thinking about our industrial companies, our manufacturers, our supply chain management individuals. What about storefronts?
It's misleading, the name is, because under the BIDCO statute, we can make any loan to any business. We only do commercial, we don't do personal loans, but any business in Michigan. So it's across this, we've done storefronts, we continue to do that. I mean, we have loans out to restaurants and bars, so it's really, it comes down to somebody that's struggling with getting a loan at a bank for a whole host of reasons, and so they come to us, and hopefully we can help them.
Okay, and without going too deep into the underwriting criteria, let's just talk very briefly, and I know we'll get into it more in depth later, but let's talk briefly about the idea of why a customer or what would cause a customer to come to ACCESS BIDCO, right? So you've mentioned that they went to a traditional bank and weren't able to get the financing that they were looking for. I guess my question is, how is it that ACCESS BIDCO is able to make those loans that our traditional institutions aren't able to make?
Yeah, and that's a good question. Primarily, the result is because of our lack of regulation. In banking today, you have to fit inside the box. It used to be in banking that loans were made based on character, and the financials of the borrower didn't always meet the requirements that the bank was looking for, but there was a character requirement as well, and banks had more latitude to make loans even if the financials weren't quite there for the borrower. That's not the case anymore. With the regulation today, banks are not going to make a loan unless you satisfy everything inside that box, and they can check everything off, because the regulator is going to come in and regulate that bank, and if they miss one of those check marks, they're going to get dinged for it. So we don't have the same box. In fact, we don't have any box. We have wide latitude to make loans. We have wide latitude to make risky loans. Not that we're looking to make high-risk loans, but really since the recession, we've had a lot of opportunity to make what would have been a bank loan 8 years ago, but isn't now, simply because of the changing dynamic of bank lending. And so we've been able to step in and make those kinds of loans. Now, I tell everybody that gets a hold of us to first exhaust your banking resource and your friends and family, because we're more expensive than a traditional bank lender would be. But once you've exhausted those resources, we might be a good fit. I mean, we can make a loan just based on good collateral, and maybe your cash flow is hurting, maybe you've lost money the last 3 years, but you have good collateral and you have a good prospect for the future. A bank's not going to lend on a good prospect for the future. They need to see cash flow. They need to see profitability. If we have good collateral, we could lend just on that. And as long as we believe, and the borrower or our client believes, that the future is looking better,
great.
That's enough for us.
Well, I think this has been a great start to the conversation. We're going to go to a break, but when we come back, I want to talk some more about some deals that ACCESS BIDCO has done and get a little bit more in depth as to when a borrower should think about coming to ACCESS BIDCO.
Excellent.
All right?
Great.
Thank you for coming back. Today we are with Joseph Reid from ACCESS BIDCO, and at the beginning we talked a little bit about the history of BIDCOs in general, but now let's talk a little bit more specifically about ACCESS BIDCO and about what you're looking for in a client. So we've talked about the fact the client might go to a traditional lending institution and for whatever reason they weren't able to make the loan, and then they come to ACCESS BIDCO. You said something very interesting. You talked about character. And so anyone who's gone through lending and underwriting classes learn about the 4 C's of credit, character being one of them. But you still really look at character. So what are you looking for when a borrower comes in?
Well, we want to be confident that we're going to get paid back, which seems so obvious. But that's where the character piece comes in. Because the loans we're making are riskier than what a traditional bank loan would be. They haven't come to meet with us unless they've been turned down by a bank, typically. And because of that, we delve into the borrower or the client, and we want to know all about them. We want to know about their family. We want to know if they have kids. Mm-hmm. We want to really. I mean, a lot of times it's a partnership, and we're not just making a loan. Sometimes we might be making an equity investment. We might be, partnering with them in some way. So we want to get to know them really well, and that becomes a big part of the decision when we go to our board to make a financial decision on where we're investing. Is the character of the person.
And so you just mentioned something that's very interesting, and I need you to repeat it so that all of our listeners can really understand this. You talked a little bit about the different regulations between traditional banking institutions and business industrial development companies, and you just mentioned that you can make a loan, or you can make an equity investment, or you could partner with the company. So how is that different than me just walking into one of our large banking institutions and trying to apply for a loan?
Well, I guess let me address that by addressing why people come to us.
Yes.
And it's not just because they can't get a loan at a bank. A lot of people come to us that can get a loan at a bank. The biggest reason, most of our loans are, there's an issue with timing, mm-hmm. And that's where the client comes from. is an example. We did a loan this summer for a real estate developer, and that developer had signed a buy-sell agreement to acquire a large property that he was going to develop into student housing. And he had 2 weeks to close, and he wasn't going to get traditional financing in 2 weeks. He came to us, and we were able to close the deal in 2 weeks from the time of the first call, about a $2 million deal. And we ended up only being in that deal for 90 days. Within that 90 days following closing that loan, he was able to go out and get his construction financing,
Right.
and took us out. And so we served as this bridge. But that's an example of where, had we not stepped into that situation, he would have lost that deal because there were multiple people behind him that were trying to acquire the property.
Correct.
Another example, we had an investor come to us who was looking to purchase a storage facility. This was a Battle Creek deal. And we actually got a call from his banker because his financing had fallen through. It was Friday at 10 to 5. Actually had weekend plans to go up north. And he needed a large deposit by Monday, and he needed to close by Wednesday, or he contractually lost the deal. This was a deal where he was purchasing this from a bank that was trying to unload it, that had foreclosed on the property. And again, there were multiple buyers that wanted it behind him. So his financing fell through. We worked all weekend, and on Monday we had his deposit for him, and on Wednesday we closed. So that was 5 days. So that's where we can be totally different than a bank. It's not that he couldn't go to a bank and get that financing, but he wasn't going to get it in 5 days.
Right. There, as you said, there are timing issues. There is a certain level of service that you're able to provide,
Right.
Because of the nimbleness and the size of ACCESS BIDCO.
Right. But there's other reasons that people come to us. We've done a lot of loans, especially during the Great Recession, from a bank customer where the bank is trying to throw them out. They either won't renew their loan, or the bank's trying to shrink because of the constraints they're under,
Right.
and they're moving people out, and we all know about that. Well, I mean, to give you an example, we did several loans where a bank was kicking out a customer, but one example, we had a printing company, and I think it was just because it was a printing company. In
Yes.
today's world, the bank wanted this thing gone, and they came to us. The bank was going to foreclose. They just wanted the loan gone. They came to us. Now, this company was profitable, never missed a payment. But in the banking world today, that's not always enough.
Right.
So we came in. We provided the financing they needed. They got a discount from the bank so that they didn't have to pay what they owed.
Okay.
And something less than that. And then within 12 months, they found another bank to take them.
So that was an example of an amazing win-win, right? So
Correct.
The bank no longer had this particular client who it's amazing. I can't tell you how many clients I've talked to who were in similar situations. They've been making all of their payments, not late at all. So they are profitable to the bank.
Yep.
But for whatever reason, as you said, the banks have different categories of businesses that they're lending to, and they may be overfunded in this category or underfunded in that.
Yep.
And so, the bank encourages them to find other financing. They found you as other financing. They got a discount from the bank.
Correct.
But then they were able to eventually find another traditional institution where they could have their money on deposit and do all of their financing. And you obviously were able to meet your missions charter as well.
Correct. Yeah. And we've done many, many deals. Many examples of that. Of the discount with the bank, we step in, short-term financing, we bridge them to a spot where they can then get bank financing somewhere else. And that's worked out really well. Another example of where we've done this, where people come to us, is we've actually had banks come to us. We did a deal this summer. It was a Rochester Hills deal. We had a customer. It was a bank customer, and the bank was trying to help them finance an office building. And because of some of the issues with the customer, the bank couldn't close the deal.
Okay.
and they would be able to close it 6 months down the road once he worked out these issues.
Correct.
But they couldn't close it now. He needed to close now. So we worked with the bank and the customer. We closed the deal. We gave him a 6-month loan. After 6 months, right on the day, the bank took us out. It was a perfect transaction. It's how we wish all of our transactions would go. Customer was thrilled because they couldn't get the bank financing to get it done. 6 months later, they did. And so, that's great. And we were able to help the bank and the customer. The customer loves that bank because of what we're able to do. Other times, banks have come to us where they have a legal lending limit and they need a participant on a short-term deal. They want to take care of their customer. A bank can only lend, typically 15% of their equity. So if it's a $10 million bank, they can lend $1.5 million. They want to take care of their customer that needs a $3 million loan. I'm giving you lots of numbers now.
No, that works.
But we've stepped in and helped banks that we've worked with to take the back half of that on a short-term basis so they can close their deal.
Now, from what you're describing, you're actually much more than a lender, right? So you work directly with clients and you do lending and you may do equity injections with that client, but you also work collaboratively with traditional lending institutions, right? They may come to you and ask you to do bridge loans or do a loan in partnership with them, as you explained about their lending limits. But it sounds like in order to do all of this, there's more than just the lending involved, that you're actually getting in there and talking to these customers and helping them understand not necessarily their business as far as their trade, but understanding business and how to operate.
Absolutely correct. One of the things we do is we provide management assistance, not just sometimes management assistance with very little money. We did a loan about 3 years ago. It wasn't a loan, it was an equity investment. We had these executives that came to us that were in the advertising business. And about 10 years ago, they sold their company. The buyer of the company ran it into the ground. Now they want to buy it back. Because of the company's recent history, they're not going to get bank funding. So they came to us, and we knew that these guys were successful in the business before they sold it. And so we ended up partnering with them. We serve on the board. We help manage the company. And since then, they've tripled the value of it since they bought it back. So that's an opportunity where we can use our expertise in combination with the expertise that the client has and really form a team. And so we try and fill in the holes wherever there is. We have a lot of experience in running different companies with the staff we have. So when somebody comes to us, they're usually really good at something, and wherever they're weak at, we try and gap those.
That is just awesome to hear. So before we close here, I want to make sure that everyone can find you. So let's have your phone number and your email address, or however it is that you would best be found.
Yep, our website, ACCESSBIDCO.com, or you can call us at 517-372-1297. And then my email is jdreid, 3, at ACCESSBIDCO.com.
All right, that is wonderful. One last thing before we go. Of course, I need to thank you for being here.
Absolutely.
But you did mention a couple of different cities that you do work in. You got the 517 area code, so we know you're in the Lansing area.
Yep.
We're in Farmington Hills now. Do you have any Farmington Hills deals?
Right now, working on one. In fact, just got an email this morning that it's a green light, so we'll be closing a deal in Farmington Hills in the next 30 days. I previously did a deal last year in Farmington Hills, and we're definitely in Southeast Michigan. We've done several deals in the Detroit metropolitan area as well.
Okay, so for all of my business owners out there who are looking for financing, having trouble, encourage you to try looking at ACCESS BIDCO, look at other different financing options. That's part of the reason why we're here, is to make sure that you have all of the different resources that are available to you to help your businesses grow. Joe, I want to thank you again for coming out today.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
And I want to thank you for the work that ACCESS BIDCO does.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And thank you for watching.